You know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose 1 year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. Patreon.com/punklautopod is where you go to get all of our weekly bonus audio for $1. Last week, we did a chart dive on the year 2009. We went overall with that instead of the punk charts. We're recording this before I've edited it down, but we recorded for almost 2.5 hours. So it might not get down to about an hour and a half after editing, but yeah, we spent a good amount of time on the 2009 charts as well as random other topics.
Yeah. It was a very digressive conversation.
Yeah. So if you like it when we get off topic, that's the place to be.
Discursive is actually the word I was thinking of. Why do we say our full names at the beginning of these episodes? No one knows who we are. This is what we're known for.
This is our claim to fame. I don't know. Almost all podcasts introduce
people say their full names normally.
Yeah,
I feel like that's like they're because they're comedians though, or like they were in a band that people know.
Yeah, I mean maybe if I go back and listen to the like podcasts who are like us, where it's just like two people who like talking about music, maybe I should listen to see how they introduce themselves. But I don't know. Dave Brown introduced himself as Dave Brown.
All right. Yeah. I guess Josh said, yeah.
Yeah. Josh Robbins.
Robbins. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, we both have the same last name, Hensley. So it kind of tells people something.
Yeah.
These two are either.
You got the brother mind melt going on.
You got the brotherhood going on here. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. We've always done it from the beginning.
I don't know. It just occurred to me that I'm like, we're like banking on our name.
Like 275 episodes in, and you're like, why do we do that? We're coming up on 300. We're very close. Yeah, I have to figure out exactly when that's going to fall before we figure out what we're doing, because I don't know what we're doing for episode 300 yet.
We can bowl a perfect game.
Yeah.
What is that? What gimmick is that? Bowling shirt punk. We do like a Smash Mouth record. We can watch the movie Pinhead.
We could do
the Bill Murray
the W's album that like is like they're bowling on the cover of it. Christian swing revival from the 90s. A band so bad they had to bring in the Five Iron Frenzy horn player to help them arrange all their horn parts for them.
Yeah. What are we doing? We don't know how to do this.
I don't know. We've done 275 episodes. I think that's the number that went up this week as of recording. So that's why I know the number is fresh in my mind. And we're like, how do we start this show? Today we are talking about an album from the year 2009. I believe you were assigned this year.
Yes.
Because we do that. We alternate between taking turns on who gets assigned what year. And then
seems to work. Yeah.
It fits in with the concept of the show much better. More in line with when our guests are on, similar concept wise.
Right. Yeah. That you're being assigned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 2000s. We've done a lot of 2000s, I feel like. I guess I should look up when the last time we did the year 2009.
I remember you telling me it was a while ago.
Yeah.
It was quite a while ago when you assigned me the year.
So the last time we covered the year 2009 was November 2022. Where we covered Coalesce's Ox.
Right.
You chose that one too.
Yeah.
Then before that, we did Touche Amore with our friends in Deathscography podcast, who they haven't done an episode in nearly 2 years. So that's sad. But
pretty shortly after they were on the show.
Yeah, it was not very long. Before that, we did Victor Fix the Sun's Person, Place, or Thing. We did that with good friend Corey. That episode also has NoFX's Cokie the Clown 7-inch.
Oh, yeah.
That's way back in episode 48. So that's a long time ago. So we've only done 2009 3 times.
Right.
So it's been a little minute. I guess because it's so close to the 2010s is why we haven't really hit it as much, which is 14 years ago, 15 years ago?
15 years ago.
Jesus. Anytime I see those, like, I see them on TikTok, they'll be like, these songs turned 20 years old this year. And then, like, I watch it and I'm like, yeah, of course they did. Yeah. These all came out that year. Like, I knew roughly when they came out. I knew it was 20 years since those songs came out. Though that's not the number that gets me. I think 15 is the number that gets me. Where I'm like, that was 15 years ago? Like, I don't know. Maybe it's because, like, I was fully adult and working, like, full time at 15 years ago. So that's what, I guess when you think about, like, yeah, milestone-y, like, oh, yeah, I was in high school or college 20 years ago. That makes sense. But when I'm like, no, I was just working.
Yeah. Yeah. 15 years, how little you change in that span of time at that past, once you're into adulthood. Yeah. 15 years of your life can go by. And, like, sure, if you had a kid 15 years ago, they would be getting their learner's permit now.
Yeah.
But if we don't have kids. So
we're
for
childless.
Us, it's like, I've just been, like, kind of a teenager for the last 15 years.
Yeah, not having children kind of keeps you in this, like, state of, I don't know, I just kind of do whatever I want.
Fuck it, man.
For the most part, The thing that people tend to get, like, tied into is, like, buying houses, and we're not buying any houses anytime soon.
No. Moved
cars?
Too many times.
Is cars the only thing we've bought?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also funny to me because 15 years ago, I have had the same Tumblr account longer than that. The same Facebook account, which, doesn't really matter. And pretty soon after this, got an Instagram account that I still use, every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, websites that you go to every single day, you're still going to 15 years later.
Yeah.
I joined Instagram a little later because I held out on the smartphone thing for.
Yeah. Instagram wasn't until 2012. Yeah. For me. But so it's weird. I mean, it's, I have kind of like a record of my life 15 years ago to some extent. Like I can go look at my Tumblr account from 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And be like, oh God. And similarly, you can go look at Facebook pictures and you're like, yeah, I wasted that.
Man, I'd like to have that hairline again.
Well, look at him. You didn't even know.
I looked at myself in the mirror the first time today about 15 minutes ago before we started recording this episode. Because, I get out of the shower and the mirror is all steamed up, so you can't really see very well. I just brush my hair the same way I brush it every day. And then I looked in the mirror and the way I had brushed my hair, like, accentuated the higher up bald spot. So that was fun to be like, God damn it, I walked around all day like that. And I was also, my face was beet red because I sat outside on my porch for like 2 hours yesterday making notes for the podcast. And I guess I got sunburned and didn't even realize it. It's like the lowest grade sunburn you can get where it doesn't hurt at all. You're just a little pink.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah. I noticed that I had a little bit of like flaky peeling skin on my scalp like the other day. I was like, oh, what? Was I in the sun that long?
Yeah, you went to Joshua Tree, right?
Well, I had a hat on pretty often.
Yeah.
While I was there, but not the whole time. I did.
Yeah.
I did walk around for a while without a hat on.
It only takes like an hour, really.
I know, but and I've gone on a couple of walks in the neighborhood recently, and at least one of them I was wearing a hat. But it's like, now I have to wear a hat. Like I got over it. I was just like, fuck it, just buzz it.
This is just how I look now.
I just gotta clip it short, and then I can live with it. And it's exposure therapy. You just face it every day. It's like, I see it. Can't wear a hat every day. Can't Dale Gribble. Now I practically have to, because I'm just gonna have a flaky scalp because I was outside for an hour.
You don't want to get melanoma.
I got a sunscreen my bald spot.
That won't look good because it'll get in your hair.
Yeah.
What's in your hair? Sunscreen. So this episode, I guess, is the Hensley brothers grapple with time. Is that what's going on here?
It feels appropriate. Yeah. 2009.
Yeah.
I was in college. I'd been in college for like a year. It's the span of time. It's more than it feels.
Yeah. 2009. I'm trying to think. I was working at Barnes & Noble at the time. I was not dating my now wife yet. Like, I don't think we were even there yet. I
was.
Yeah. Yeah. I had met her. Like, she was, because I had moved when you went to college. I told our parents, I was like, so when he leaves, I'm leaving too. Because I don't want to be here by myself. So
you told them that?
Well, I told basically not like that. I didn't say like I
when
don't
he's
want to.
Gone, I'm fucking out.
No, it was more of I had already planned on moving out before you had actually gone to school yet, and so I did like tell them that. But I also told them that in August, right before you were about to go to school. So it was yeah. So you'd been there maybe a year. I had I moved out right after you went to school. So I had been out on my own for about a year by that point. I had met her. We weren't together yet. She was my roommate's cousin. And I don't think she was even working there yet. I don't think she started working there till a year later. So I was working, Barnes & Noble, making $130 a week, somehow surviving. I don't know how I did that. I mean, my rent was only $200 a month, but because I was, rooming, but still
splitting a house with 3 people.
Yeah. I think because honestly, I think what I pay now is still what they were paying. Maybe not. Might have been a little lower then, but because I think because they also some of the money that I gave them went towards food. So I didn't have to buy all my own food. They would buy groceries, and because they were, a couple. So they were cooking dinner and all the time. And then that'd be kind of weird if a couple was making a dinner and your third roommate was just you can't have any of this.
When you guys are done with the kitchen, I'm going to go microwave some Hot Pockets.
I remember you went with me to the grocery store one time. It was Walmart. I had gotten paid and I was like, all right, I'm going grocery shopping. And I bought all the food I was going to eat at work and other stuff for $20. And you were like, how did you do that? You were surprised at how much I got for only $20.
Because you got a shit ton of dollar microwave burritos, right?
Yeah.
Or frozen burritos.
Yeah. Those ones that are in the deli section, they were only $1 a piece, but they weren't frozen. They were slightly better than those frozen ones. But even then, when you cooked them in the microwave, they dried to shit and got all rubbery.
It's marginally better. It's not better.
Yeah. So that was really the only food I was really covering. It was just what I took to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And gas. And was I smoking yet? 2009.
When did you start smoking?
I started smoking.
You
broke edge
so late.
I broke edge at 22 years old. It would have been that year. Yeah. I was 22 when I broke edge. So it was right after Fest. Yeah.
I broke edge before I was 21.
Yeah.
When you're supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're 22, you just can do it. You can just buy it. It's not you're not doing anything wild.
Yeah.
Camel filters, first pack. If you're on the Twitter, you'll see that cigarette thread that was going around. Cigarettes are one of those things, smoking. It's one of those things where I'm glad I don't smoke anymore, but I do miss it. But that I also partly blame that too, though. Taking in secondhand smoke for the first 10 years of my life. I don't remember when my parents stopped smoking, but I got a good, healthy childhood of secondhand smoke. So
yeah, you got more of it than I did.
I was primed to be a smoker by the time I did. So yeah, 2009. Music wise, was Cinder Smoke a thing yet?
Yeah.
So we had started that.
That summer actually, 2009. So 2000 started dating my wife in 2008, pretty much immediately in college. We broke up in spring of 2009. That summer, I went camping with our friends who I was in a metalcore band with, death metal metalcore band in high school with. We came back and immediately demoed 2 songs. He was just like, oh, let's play this I've been working on. And I just wrote vocal parts really quickly. And then, had lyrics kind of ready that I could work off of. And We recorded those 2 songs that summer, 2009, and then we brought you in.
Yeah, I feel like maybe I didn't come in until like 2010. Like because I'm remembering
When did we first play?
the very first show. I don't know. It's hard to remember. It might have been 2010 when we played our first show, but that's not why you called. Yeah. So I guess to tie that in, we were active in a music scene at that time, somewhat, if you want to call it a scene. We were playing shows around this time and going to lots of shows at this time. So we were very definitely plugged in to music at the time.
2009, I must have booked Fairground Avenue at the coffee shop in Hickory.
Yeah, that feels plausible.
That's when that happened. And like half the bands didn't play.
Yeah.
That were on the flyer.
Was that the 100th show?
Yeah. No.
That was the other one.
Yeah, it was the first one where there was supposed to be another headliner, and then they like went home.
Yeah.
Like they didn't finish the tour or whatever.
And then became a shoegaze band.
No, 100th was the next one. Then 100th played the next one.
Oh, okay.
And they became a shoegaze band.
Yeah. Weird. But yeah, let's look at the year 2009. We covered quite a bit of this year, specifically the non-punk records over on the Patreon. So if you want to hear that, you can head over there. So we actually passed a lot of these records while we were talking about those. Honestly, the first handful or barely anything anybody's going to even know. What was going on in 2009 sonically?
As far as like what I was really paying attention to and what I was into, I was pretty excited for the Converge record that came out that year, and then was kind of disappointed with it once it came out.
Yeah, that was the record that it was like announced like all these guests were going to be on it. This Axe to Fall. It's like, oh, we got all these guests on here, tons of people. We got Mookie
from Genghis Tron. We got Steve Until. We got, who else was on there? Fucking Stove Bretsky.
Yeah.
Adam McGrath, Steve Brodsky from Cave-In. So there's like the Cave-In collab on here. Chris Taylor from Pig Destroyer? No,
Page 99.
Page 99, right. I think there might have been. Was there a Pig Destroyer person on?
Could be.
No.
Is Sean
Maybe
Ingram on there from Coalesce?
No.
I don't know what I'm thinking of.
But the 100 Demons guy is on.
Oh, yeah.
The Twitching Tongues guy.
And I remember being like, this will be really cool. I like all of these guests. And then like it came out and I was like, this record's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. All of the guest feature spots kind of dragged the record down. Like the best material on here is the stuff that's just them.
Yeah.
But I didn't love it. That was kind of disappointing. But I loved the one after. So
yeah,
I liked
yeah.
it, but it didn't meet the hype. I definitely remember that Japandroids record, Post Nothing.
Yeah, that was a pretty big record.
That was a big deal. And then that band continued to be a bigger deal than they should have been.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how often I see Japan. I mean, they're like a meme now at this point, but music writers love to reference Japandroids for some reason. Like after that first record, I was like, this isn't going to be anything.
Well, it just didn't feel like the type of band that was going to be anything anyway. Like, were they a touring band? Like, did they do a lot of stuff live? They're a 2-piece. So that's kind of like you got to do a certain thing as a 2-piece.
Yeah. I think the way it started, it was kind of supposed to be just a project, and then it blew up. So then they had to kind of run with it. But then they still took forever to put out records.
Are they just a blog band? Is that kind of what they lived off of?
Yeah. I mean, this was that era.
Yeah. Blog bands taking off.
I wouldn't have heard that Empire record in 2009, but shortly after that, I would be aware of that band.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the same year that Summer Fences by Castavet came out. And I don't think we would have heard it in 2009. We would have heard it a little later.
Yeah.
I think of 2009 as an important year for what's coming next.
Yeah.
There's a couple artists and records that came out this year that I want to save for when we get into our main album discussion. So I want to loop that idea kind of together. I bought that, but...
Well, I'll say this: 2009 is a closing of a window, and it's kind of a late closing window of like I listened to that Between the Buried and Me record and was kind of like, eh. And I bought that Alexis on Fire record and was like, this is pretty good. But just an interest in that fading in metalcore. I mean, naturally.
Yeah, 2009 metalcore is like passe. Like it had a pretty good decade of kind of like being on top as far as youth culture, local scenes. I feel like every high school had a metalcore scene in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Because it was easy to play, easy for children to play.
You just need the one. Well, you need a solid enough drummer, and then you probably just need like the one guitarist who can come up with the more technical parts.
Yeah, and it would have just been us losing interest in metalcore. Like there would be like bands we still liked that we would follow up. When there's a Darkest Hour record that came out in 2009. I probably heard it at the time and thought this is fine, and not really went back to it much. For us,
the Brown Pants metal too.
Yeah.
We were fading from that scene, which we mentioned on the Patreon, but it's worth mentioning here, the Scion Rock Fest.
Yeah.
Like Boris and Neurosis and Mastodon and Converge and Coalesce and
it was
Torch. It was like everything.
U.S. Christmas.
Yeah. Krallis.
Yeah.
Baroness.
It was a wide range of,
and it was free.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was weird.
And so so our dumbasses are like, well, we gotta drive overnight to get there.
Yeah, I don't know if we ever told this story. I
think we have. It's
probably
worth mentioning it here, though. It's
2009.
It's the time period. It like this is part of what I wanted to talk about in conjunction with this record in this year.
Yeah, the Scion Rock Fest was in. We discovered February 2009. We did that on the Patreon. We figured that out, and we were like, it's free, but you still had to like print off.
You weren't guaranteed to get in.
Yeah, you weren't guaranteed to get in. That was the idea. You're like, oh shit, we got to get there early then. So our idea was to drive overnight to get there in the morning. And of course, me and our friend were like, let's go to this show the night before.
Who did you see?
That was Dysnomia, if you remember them from the Asheville days.
What?
They were like that punk band that was like, I think it was like Teenage Heart people were in that one.
Huh.
And Chiaroscuro was the other band, and maybe Torch Runner. Honestly, I think Torch Runner was there. I don't know if we saw Torch Runner though, because we didn't stay the whole show. Yes, I feel like it was Torch Runner, because then our friend, I'm pretty sure, stole a patch from them. He's like, it was just in the couch. I was like, the merch table's right there, like literally next to the couch. So like, where it came from. That was weird,
but it wasn't on the table.
Yeah, I think it did fall off the table and it was in like the couch cushion, and he just found it and was like, I'm taking that. I guess he was just like, finders keepers.
Torch Runner probably would have given him one.
Yeah. I mean, they were always screening their own stuff.
Yeah, we'll sell you that shirt for $5. Here, you want the EP too?
Yeah. Yeah. And so we came back to get you, and then we were like, all right, let's head on out at 11 o'clock at night.
God.
Whatever. No, what time was it? It's about a 5-hour drive. So, but we did stop at Waffle House right outside.
We probably left at what time did we have to get there? That's what I can't remember. What time did the doors open?
I think the doors were like 10 or 11. Because I remember we got there and we waited outside for a really long time.
Oh, yeah. Because we got there and the line was fucking huge.
Yeah, because everybody else had the same bright idea. We got to get there early.
We were like 2 blocks from the venue. Almost.
And in all reality, we could have just shown up like an hour after doors and probably gotten in no problem, because it wasn't like max capacity sold out. Like it was weird. So it was at the Masquerade, right?
Yeah.
And the Masquerade has like multi levels and stages. Like they have a big outdoor stage, and then they had like 3 floors maybe.
Yeah. There's like 3 indoor stages, and because it's heaven, purgatory, and hell, and then there was the big outdoor stage.
Yeah. And they even may have been using like corners of the building too for like certain bands to play too. So like, while you maybe couldn't get into a room, like maybe that room got filled into max capacity, like
we couldn't get in to see Coalesce.
Yeah, Coalesce is the one we missed because we couldn't get in that room. Because I think they were in like the smallest room, and that's also the show too, where like Coalesce got yelled at for like breaking his microphone, the venue's microphones or something like that. But yeah, we got to see most everybody. I think Coalesce is the only one we didn't really get to see. But so yeah, that thing was huge, and
then we drove back.
Yeah,
that night,
that same night. Yeah, and then a snowstorm happened. Remember that too? Oh, and we got lost on the way back, and we didn't have. We didn't have smartphones. I don't think they really. If they existed, none of us had them. You know,
no one had them. There was like in 2009. There was probably like one person at my college that had one.
Yeah, the richest kid.
Yeah,
or the most like tech forward person.
Yeah,
and yeah, we got lost on the way back because part of like we had to do MapQuest, and MapQuest back then always fucking wrong, always wrong. I don't know why we were like, we got to use it, but also it will be wrong at some point. We just had to figure out how to get there. And I know we got off of what we were supposed to on the way down, but we found where we were supposed to be pretty quickly. And so it wasn't that bad. But then coming back, like trying to do it backwards, that part where we got off, like we really got off coming back. And I think we stopped at a gas station and I made you go get directions. I was like, but I'm the one driving. So I don't know why I did that. Yeah. And it snowed, and then like we stayed the night. It was that was a mess.
Yeah. But that's when we were doing that kind of shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, oh well, yeah, I'm gonna drive 4 hours to see this band I've seen before.
Yeah. But it was all these bands.
Well, I meant just like we would drive to Carborough from, Asheville.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's like I'm gonna go see this band I've seen before.
Yeah. I kind of have to do that in North Carolina, though. Everything's spread out the way it is. So, yeah, that's that's a rough idea of what we were like in 2009. Is there anything else you want to say in this section, or should we just go ahead and move on to the record?
I don't really have. So the thing about 2009, I remember it very well and was paying attention to a lot of stuff. And I know tons of records that came out that year. Like, looking at these charts, I recognize most of this stuff. But when I was picking what we were going to talk about, I was like, I don't want to talk about that for like most of it.
Yeah. Yeah, we did it weird this time where like you just looked through it. I gave you the year and we were on the call together and you just like you just started looking for everything. And then so you didn't do the normal thing where you like pick stuff and we're like, what about these? And it was instead we were just like, nah, not that one.
Yeah. Nah. Yeah, we talked through it a little more. And it was like, I just didn't have strong choices. I was like, we could talk about that first McTaverscan record. I didn't know it when it came out, but we saw their first U.S. show.
Yeah, that would be a couple years later, but yeah. Yeah, looking at it, I'm like, I don't think 2009 is like one of my favorite years.
As I was going through the charts, and it's number 150, so I just found it again. The record that I picked was like the first one. And I was like, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, let's keep going. And then there was just nothing else.
Yeah.
I was like, I would have thought this year was better.
You would think. And I think there's better stuff.
There's decent stuff. But it was just like, we've talked about that. Or it's too similar to stuff we've talked about recently. Or,
Yeah.
I wanted something different to talk about.
Well, let's get into it. I gave you the year 2009, and you selected Introverted Romance in Our Troubled Minds by P.S. Eliot.
To criticize monogamy, to abhor a cold heart and an altered state of mind. And baby, you're just what I'm looking for, 'cause we'll go to sleep when we're dead, and I'll quit when I'm 25, but now I'm feeling indestructible, aimlessly alive.
Some stats on the band. P.S. Eliot were from Birmingham, Alabama. They formed in the year 2007. This record was released on Salinas Records, and this is the band's debut full length. The personnel on this record is Catherine Simonetti on bass, Michael McClellan on bass, Allison Crutchfield on drums and vocals, Will Granger on guitar and vocals, and Katie Crutchfield on guitar and vocals. And the album was produced by Matt Whitson, as well as the band. And yes, P.S. Eliot is not the starting point, but the point where people became aware of the Crutchfield sisters, who are now, Katie especially, like one of the biggest indie artists in the world right now. And then Allison as well. So Katie Crutchfield is, in case you don't know, is Waxahatchee, and Allison Crutchfield was in the band Swearin. So if you are paying attention to when this was released, Waxahatchee just released one of their new records this year, and they're kind of on people's minds again. So what made you choose this album?
I thought it was, like I said, I wanted to talk about something different. Looking at this time period, like this record felt like it was of a moment in this time period, and it represented something that I don't think we've really talked about very much on the show. That would be a pretty prominent aspect of punk culture, and the punk culture that we were in, or at least adjacent to. So I thought it was like something that was very close to home, but maybe not a super familiar pick, but definitely an important one. And also just like, yeah, I mean, Waxahatchee's new record just came out. I mean, that's a 15-year career there, that we, more than that really, but that we, from this P.S. Eliot record where everyone became aware of her to now, to kind of see an artist and be like, well, I just listened to that new record. I've listened to a few of the more recent records, Waxahatchee records. Let's look at the beginning. I thought that was kind of an interesting opportunity, a rare opportunity. I also like looking at so much of this. It's like so much of the choices from 2009. I was just like, I don't want to do this metalcore stuff. I don't want to do anything that's like macho, and like hardcore is always hard to talk about if it's not like a band with a big story. It can be tough to hone in on a hardcore record from a band that was just a hardcore band that was active at the time. That's kind of it. You're like, that they sounded like these bands. What else?
Well, and also during this time period, like straight ahead hardcore still wasn't really in fashion at the time. Like we were coming out of metalcore. Deathcore is on its own little wavelength that's going on too. You do have like and
we've talked about Touche Amore already. So
yeah, you have the Death Wish hardcore is during this time period. But honestly, I feel like that even gets a little bigger, in the next 2 or 3 years, because we're post Cursed at this point too. Like even that kind of hardcore.
Well, we're getting into the period of everyone being influenced by Cursed.
Yeah,
but even still, that takes a year or two from here.
Yeah. So yeah, this 2009 probably is not like a peak hardcore year really to discuss anyway.
And it wasn't a very good, strong year for orgcore.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Epiphat, orgcore, that kind of punk stuff. Like it's not even like a super big year for that kind of stuff.
Like I think there's a American Steel record, and I was like, well, it's kind of the same as the American Steel record we've talked about before.
Yeah,
it's like, what else am I gonna say about how great those Awa'os are? So this feels to me, P.S. Eliot. They fit in the fest punk category, the orgcore category to a degree, but they're a little bit separated from it, a little bit different from it. Not exactly in my wheelhouse, but close enough.
Yeah. So I still don't know where to go from here. When did you first hear P.S. Eliot?
I don't know.
Because I was thinking about it and I was like, I don't think I actually ever heard P.S. Eliot until I just on a whim chose to listen to this album like last year. I had just listened to this record when you chose it. I was like, oh, that one? Okay. Interesting. Mainly because I was like, what are we going to talk about? We'll get into that later. But This was not a record that was on my radar in 2009 or even like the couple years after. I was aware of who they were. Like I knew that P.S. Eliot had played Edge Frat, which was a house in Asheville that Matt from Old Flings lived in and helped book shows through. And that's also where we saw Lemuria and Iron Sheik play. So there was a P.S. Eliot show there, but I wasn't there for that. So I didn't
go to that. No.
I didn't go to that. I didn't know P.S. Eliot at the time. And it was like I saw the album art on Tumblr. Like that was kind of like my introduction to P.S. Eliot. Yeah. I maybe heard a song then, but nothing that stuck. So really, my introduction to the Crutchfields is Waxahatchee and Swearin. Like that's where I start, because I start with the first records from both of those.
Yeah. So
like that's my introduction to P.S. Eliot is, oh, the two from P.S. Eliot have each started their own bands and they're both really good. Okay, we'll check them out. Like that's
yeah.
The twins from P.S. Eliot have solo projects. Okay, like that's really that was my experience with P.S. Eliot. Knowing they were a band with twins or something like that.
They're not
these sisters.
They're not twins.
They are
twins. They are twins?
Yeah, they are twins.
They're not identical.
I mean, maybe not now. Maybe they were when they were younger. I don't know. But they're twins.
Their faces look different enough. I mean, obviously they look like siblings, but they don't look, I wouldn't call them identical twins. Yeah. No, I mine's the same. Like I saw them on Tumblr. That was it. Like,
yeah,
I may have heard them then. And then I never downloaded any other music. Yeah. The first time I've listened to P.S. Eliot, I listened to this record in like 2019.
So yeah, like well past the point Waxahatchee was and Swearin were like things.
But yeah, I didn't really get into Waxahatchee when they first came out. I loved Swearin. That first Swearin record.
Yeah.
I loved.
Yeah, I definitely lean more Swearin. I listened to the first two Waxahatchee records when they came out. It was too singer-songwritery for me. That's why I didn't really like click with it as much. And then I think I like skipped two of the records after and then came back on the blow up. I think that's when I came back to Waxahatchee. So I skipped like the transitionary period. But I always like Swearin more. I like the first record. I didn't like the second record that much, and then loved the third record. But Allison also seemed, she did a lot more other things too. Like she had a solo record and she was involved with Radiator Hospital and was in what's that band called? Something Great Tundra or something like that, which was like also Sam from Radiator Hospital too. So she was more tied to that scene. And that's more what I listened to. And then Waxahatchee, I just thought more singer-songwriter who then just kind of blew up into a bigger sensation in indie music, specifically of the twangy variety. So thinking of this record and this album and who the Crutchfields became later, I think this is one of the most important records of this style from this time period. And I think there are a handful of other artists that I would kind of add to this beginnings of what the next decade of like punk and indie punk would become, because we are smack dab in the like this is the beginning of indie punk as like kind of a thing. So I have a couple records that just like I think of that are in the same kind of like family as this album and would become bigger bands in the future. One of the big ones is ones that we both really love is Can't Maintain by AJJ came out. This is the AJJ record where they went full band, full electric. And kind of, I feel like it's more important for what comes after. Because folk punk was a thing before the indie punk thing sort of took off. But it had a ceiling. Like, it was only going to go so far. Another important record from around this time period. Scrambles by Bomb the Music Industry. As much as I do not give a shit about Jeff Rosenstock, he is one of the most important musicians in punk music.
Big sigh.
During this time period. And Scrambles was one of the records that was like taking Bomb the Music Industry to that next level, besides just being the ska band, you know. There is the Lars Stevenson EP in 2009. They had released their record in 2008. So that's right after the very first album. And there's the EP Holy Ghost that came out that year. Lars Stevenson, I think, is pretty important to the more P.S. Eliot, Waxahatchee side of things of punk music. Also worth mentioning, Hop Along, I believe, had a record in 2009.
Yeah.
an EP, Is Something Wrong by Hop Along. Came out that year. Hop Along is very influential, specifically on P.S. Eliot, because I think one of the members has like a tattoo of Hop Along on their arm or something like that.
Katie has the
hat.
She has the drawing from the first Hop Along Queen Annesley.
Lemuria's first collection came out in 2009.
Yeah.
This was right after Get Better. This was them collecting a bunch of their early EPs and putting them together. And to most people, it's like an LP in its own right. Even though it's a compilation, people listen to Get Better and First Collection in conjunction. Everyone listened to that stuff at the same time. Iron Sheik could release Shitty Rambo in 2009. So we are a year away from Not Like This coming out. The 2008 demo happens. Shitty Rambo comes out. Iron Sheik is bubbling under the surface there. Reviver, where were they at? Reviver had done Life Moves 7-inch.
Yeah.
In 2009. Joyce Manor, formed in 2008. They're not quite there yet. The first thing they do that's of note is in 2010, it looks like. I could have sworn they had something. Demo in 2009. So they were demoing in 2009. Also giving you an idea of the other side of things going on. So that 2009 is very much here are all the ingredients for what the next 5 years is going to look like in indie punk.
2008 Tiger's Jaws self-titled comes out.
Yep. Yeah. The Castavet record, Summer Fences, came out in 2009. That stuff's more important to emo. But
emo stuff. But it's the same scene.
It is the same scene. It's very much the same type of people who were listening to P.S. Eliot that were also like digging Snowing,
Yeah. They're playing the same. They're playing the same houses. They're playing the same. Which that's what this scene was. I mean, that's where that scene was. It was. We saw Lemuria at a record store and a house. Yeah. We didn't get to see Tiger's Jaw, but like our buddy who we booked at the coffee shop in our little town had played a show with Tiger's Jaw.
And they were being talked about at that point,
Yeah.
Polar Bear Club, right? Isn't they have that record out already?
Yeah. I think that first record had come out in 2008.
Where are the Menzingers in 2009? I feel like the Menzingers are also a thing by 2009.
Yeah. But these bands were all over Tumblr. And you saw them at a house. You saw them at a record store. You saw them at a coffee shop that did shows.
You very rarely ever saw them in actual venues. Or if you did, it was like the little tiny venue. It
was a dive bar that did shows.
Yeah.
Which, it's not that scene doesn't still exist. I mean, people, DIY still exists, but
they don't. DIY still exists. They're still playing dive bars and they're still playing basements and stuff like that. But the sound is different. It's not the same kind of music that's coming out.
No.
This scene was a kind of a hybrid. This scene was a mixture of punk, emo, folk punk, singer-songwritery stuff, and not much hardcore. Hardcore was its own thing. So like this is what the scene was. This scene was just like a mixture of different kinds of like punk subgenres. But it was as much as
hardcore was its own thing. Like the sonic elements don't really cross over, but a lot of the same people do, because house venues where you would have a hardcore band play and then you'd have an emo band play, sometimes the same show. Like, Screamo was occupying kind of both of those spaces too.
Yeah.
It was a lot of the same people, but like the core of like the indie punk sound and what would eventually turn into like the variations of emo, and then your variations of slacker rock and your power pop stuff that has come to dominate a lot of like what we broadly categorize as indie rock now, that we have talked about as basically supplanting a more traditional sense of punk rock, to where there's like a lot of the stuff that we call punk because it sounds similar to what we were seeing in the punk scene isn't called punk.
Yeah. Yeah, I even read a review that did the same thing. I can't remember which record it was or what artist it was exactly, but they called it a punk band, whereas today I don't think you would have called it punk. You wouldn't label it as punk music. And I think it was something that was calling, that's what it was. It was calling it pop punk. It was calling like something with like real gruff vocals and like real noisy. They were still saying that was pop punk. Yeah,
that called Dillinger for pop punk.
Yeah, we called them pop punk all the time. Now that seems weird to say, but yeah, at that time, everybody was calling everything pop punk, at least in that level of punk music that was going on at that time. So yeah, our punk umbrella was pretty big. And you're right. You'd see the same people at a hardcore show, at a screamo show, at an emo show, at just like a stripped down singer songwriter show. It was always the same people at all those shows. So there's a lot more cross pollination when it came to that kind of stuff. Because like we knew shitloads of people who were super into Converge and Lemuria at the same time.
Yeah.
It was not weird to be like, yeah, I saw Neurosis and then I went and saw Against Me. Like that wasn't weird. You just kind of just went to everything that was happening. And you saw people you knew all the time at all these shows. Recognized.
The same hair color, the same tattoos. You got unlimited resources. There nothing to lose. You make a choice. You were always afraid of dying. And I know I've been distant and I failed you with doubt, but I've been heartbroken and I figured out we all make a choice. And I've never been afraid of dying. But it's fine, because I'm already hardly alive. And we keep on holding on, hostile or withdrawn. And it's our will or way through it every day. And I don't really care to stop it, because we brought it on ourselves for so long. And it helps us to remain valiant. Harboring affection, you pull me in too deep. Attention, listen for my belief will just come back. We're always ashamed of trying, and it's all so familiar on this spin of the ground. Behind last night's mascara, $10 bets you knew you'd lose. You've never been ashamed of trying, but it's fine. I'm already hardly alive, and we keep on holding on, hostile or withdrawn. And it's our will.
We said on the show a long time ago that we felt like the Crutchfields are one of the most influential artists of like the 2010s, especially when it comes to like indie rock. And Katie continues to be one of the most influential musicians because her pivot to like country folky style stuff has pivoted a lot of the indie rock scene along with it. But twangy country is in right now.
Yeah, twangy alt country indie rock stuff has definitely followed along with her, and I don't know how much of it's a reaction to it or how much of it is just kind of lateral thinking, but she definitely was a pretty the tip of the spear, I guess. A pretty significant first step towards an alt country, which I guess we're just calling it alt country. I don't.
Are we? I mean, it's what it is.
That's fine. I think that's what most people have come to. The term most people have come to embrace.
It just doesn't sound like what most older alt country is, or but it is what it is. It's alternative music mixed with country. Like that's what it is. It's just I guess the umbrella term for alt country is just getting bigger and including a little bit more folksier and a little bit more,
which is fine because country music as a genre is massive.
Yeah,
constantly changing. Almost useless as a genre term, to be completely honest. Like,
yeah, because you say country, it's just like saying rock music. It's useless as a descriptor.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, the only thing, well, at least rock music. If you say rock music, people are going to be able to put that straight time rock rhythm. That's going to come immediately. When you say country, what is the distinct rhythmic feel of country music? It's a lot of things. But so the Crutchfields immediately christened as the ones to watch.
Well, yeah, because P.S. Eliot was like, I'm not going to say they were huge because they weren't huge, but they tapped into that Tumblr, specific, the fest punk, because they played fest, or core adjacent field, but they were also known for like their songwriting, lyric writing specifically. Like immediately this record comes out and people are obsessed with this album. Maybe not in huge numbers, but the people who heard it and really got into it immediately. And this band quickly meant a lot to a lot of people. This record especially. I think it's unfortunate that you and I missed it the first time, because I think it's the type of record that were we at 18 and 22 or whatever, we probably would have gotten a lot more out of at that age getting into it than me listening to it for the first time after having heard 4 Waxahatchee records. I'd already heard where she went, where they both went. So it doesn't quite. This record is not nostalgic for me. This specific record doesn't mean a lot to me personally. I can be nostalgic for the time period. I can place it for when it came out and for those shows and the scenes that we were involved with going to Fest around for the first couple of years there. So it's to me, listening to this record is now academic. Me putting it on, I'm like, well, let's see what they sounded like in the beginning. This is the jumping off point of the group and their careers. So hearing it, I'm like, oh, okay. This makes a lot of sense where they go and how they get there.
Yeah. So I kind of had a vague idea of what T.S. Eliot sounded like. Like I said, I'd listened to this record before, but maybe I didn't listen to the whole thing. I don't know. Because listening to it for this episode, I was not totally prepared for how much it sounds exactly like if you put Waxahatchee and Swearin together.
Yeah, putting it on, I was like, oh, American Weekend sounds exactly like P.S. Eliot, just a little slower. That's how I felt. It had that same super lo-fi quality, very rough production, but still it's singer-songwritery, but also with a full band behind it and a little bit more full body. Yeah, it does. It is. And it really, if you really think about it, you're like, yeah, Swearin and Waxahatchee are what P.S. Eliot are. The two sides just kind of split off into two different directions. So it shouldn't, listening to both those bands, no one should have been surprised with how those bands sounded.
If you were there with P.S. Eliot at the beginning and then they go do their separate things, it's a very natural progression. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Me reverse engineering it, going backwards, having heard, loved Swearin and then having, grown to enjoy some Waxahatchee records later in her career and can go back to this record. And I'm like, oh, I thought, or I would have thought based on what I hazily thought P.S. Eliot sounded like and what I know Waxahatchee to sound like, I would have thought that Swearin as a band was more of a deliberate choice to explore a different sound instead of just continuing to do that side of the band that they were already doing.
Yeah.
That it was P.S. Eliot kind of ends and then Allison's like, I want to do a garage rock band. That's how I imagined Swearin forming instead of it just being, I'm going to continue to do what I have been doing.
Yeah. There is a little story with this record too.
Yeah.
So the album was recorded. Oh, okay. I gotta go back a little bit further. So prior to P.S. Eliot, Katie and Allison were also in a band called the Ackleys. That band was also with Michael McClellan, who plays bass on this record, though was not actually in the band. So I don't know how that exactly worked out. I think Michael's on the EP before and then plays a little on this record. They're a band called the Ackleys. They were teenagers at the time when they were playing that. Their parents kind of encouraged them to chase music or just let them chase music because when they were teenagers, they would go to school and then they'd get off the bus, go home and then go in the basement and play music until their parents were like, please stop, come upstairs. So basically every day after school, they just played music together in the basement until the Ackleys form. And then that band they do some shows. There's some out of town type shows. They don't tour extensively because they are literal children still. So they eventually are done there. And so they go off to college. I believe Allison goes off to college in Tuscaloosa, which I think is where Alabama State is. And Katie comes and hangs out there. Like Katie like immediately goes on tour at some point. I don't know what she was touring with or who with, but she basically just like dives into music. And they decide to like start this band, P.S. Eliot. They play out a bit. There's like a story about like them like abandoning a bass player somewhere in the middle on the tour because they had like argument. I don't know when that was. I think that was like their first bass player, like maybe before Michael even. It was an early band member. They just like they were arguing and then like abandoned. Weird. I don't know how that story played out, but so they decide, okay, we're in Tuscaloosa. This is the house that Allison lives in, and they're like, we're gonna record this record. So they get this guy, Matt Whitson. He was a musician who like he was in bands Fake Tyrants and Black Hole Kids, and he wound up working on other stuff later. The only stuff that you and I would really recognize is like he did half of a split with the Self Defense Family. He like produced the Null side of the Null Self Defense Family split. I think they were a Birmingham band, but he also recorded Live from Century City by Dan Sartain, as well as produced Western Hills, which was Dan Sartain's like Westerns music cover album that he did with like his dad on the record. So he's just like an Alabama Birmingham producer. And he was like, he spent a lot of money on recording equipment to record his own bands, and then was like, became the guy who would record your band for pretty cheap. And so they asked him to record their record with them. And he had recorded some of their Ackley's material before. And he was like, these kids, they're young. I'm going to be like wrangling them. I'm like 22, 23. They're like 15 to 16. This is going to be rough, but they were like really easy to work with and like super professional. And they kind of knew what they wanted right away, which explains why they have succeeded as much as they have in their careers, because as teenagers, they're like, oh, we're very serious about this music and we're going to go far. You know, it pays off in the long run. So then he goes, they record this record at their house in Tuscaloosa. And there's a funny story because they interviewed him for like a 2016 reissue. And he said he had planned on going over to their house the night before. This was recorded on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And his plan was to come over Friday night and maybe like start planning what they were going to do the next day, like figuring out, well, we're going to record this, this, and this. He said he got there at like 10 o'clock at night, and he was let in by Will Granger, who then immediately went back to sleep because the whole band had gone to bed already by 10 o'clock, which is very funny in like a college town. And they're young, you know, they're partying age. And we know they're partying age because the next night they party. But I guess they were like, we're going to go to bed early and get up bright and early. I guess maybe they're thinking. So he said he's just left alone in the house by himself, sitting on the couch in the dark with a 6-pack of Busch Light. And he's just trying to get tired because like he planned on being awake for hours. And this is pre-iPhone. So he's like, this is a very primitive kind of boring. Like it was the most bored you could possibly be. But then the next day he is like woken up and the house is full of people. They're like making breakfast. Apparently the day they decided to record was the same day as the Iron Bowl, which was the big Alabama versus Auburn game. So like that's like a huge rivalry in Alabama sports, football. Alabama's Roll Tide, I think.
Yeah.
that school. So it's like the town like is packed during that. There's like, they said like 100 to 200,000 people come to town for that thing every year. And the house is slam full because people wanted to come over and watch the big game, which is apparently the TV was right where they were planning on recording vocals. So what they're doing is they have the game on mute. People are watching the game. And then 10 feet away, Katie is recording her vocals. And the room is wooden. It's got high ceilings, so it's real echoey. That comes across on the record.
Yeah.
And she said, she's like, I was also smoking a lot of weed at the time, and I got really high, and I did all my vocals in one sitting. And then I listened back to them a couple hours later, and I had to redo all of them.
Yeah. Man.
So after the first day of recording, then everybody just goes and parties. Because it's a college town, it's full of frats and college houses, and so it's a big game. So they said they went from party to party to party to party to party, and it was just like people drinking like crazy. Like they're like at one point Katie's making out with like a stranger, and like, which we know now Katie has some substance abuse issues and she's gotten sober over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So like this was someone in their very early 20s who was very much like partying all the time. She may not even been like 21 even. It could have been that kind of situation. But they just go wild and party all night. And then the very next day they redo vocals, and he said the only people in the room were Katie, him, and Katie's like high school sweetheart who like they broke up a while back, but they were still really close friends. And he's like, but I think most of this record's about him.
Yeah.
So she's singing about him right while he's in the room. And he was like, I thought it was super awkward, but they were like fine and cool with it. So it was just this weird, like, and then like that was all the initial stuff. Like they just did 2 days of full recording, and then they did like overdubs and mixing and stuff like a week later at his house. More controlled scenario. And
yeah,
that's why they started adding in like all those weird instruments in there. But yeah, that was the recording process of this P.S. Eliot record. It just sounds like pure chaos. And it's actually kind of a wonder that it's
surprising it doesn't sound worse.
Yeah, that was my thinking. I was like, if there's like a shitload of people in there watching a fucking I don't know how much of her vocals they wound up using from the first take. I assume she said she was high and they had to redo them all. So maybe it was the stuff they did the next day was what they wound up using for the record. But even then, that sounds like they recorded the band somewhere. They may have done that in like a side room or something else where maybe everybody wasn't in the room. But that is wild. Just to have like a house full of people and you're trying to record a record. Which Katie was like, I don't know what we were thinking. I would never do that now, like that is ridiculous. I couldn't imagine that. Just feeling like that's like the worst way to record a record. Feels like you wouldn't be productive at all.
Yeah. You got to tell people to shut up constantly.
Yeah. Oh, and this guy too, he was like, I mainly recorded like heavy bands, like hardcore bands and punk bands. And like, we recorded at my place and it was a very controlled atmosphere and everybody had a really big sound. And we recorded at their house, which has this big echoey wood room, and they wanted to play everything live, which he had not done before. Like everything he'd done was just tracked individually.
Yeah.
So he said it was just like, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how this is going to sound when it comes out.
Yeah. Not enough people say don't record your first thing live.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, unless it's a demo. If it's a demo, fine. Record it live. That's gonna work for a demo way better. But you're gonna do a full length album. Man, don't do that live.
Yeah.
Not that early in your life. Not that young of a musician.
Yeah. So we haven't really talked much about the music on this record. What did you think of it?
It's fine. is my overall opinion. I think that it's very remarkable. I mean, obviously the circumstances of recording it, just that the fact that it yielded something this listenable is incredible, and it speaks to their talent and their drive. It makes it better, truly.
Yeah,
like it's like, well, wow, you surpassed the occasion. Like you didn't just rise to the moment. Like you did something. I mean, you did something that has been influential.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Since it came out. You did something that you essentially built your career on like in 2 days in the worst recording scenario possible. I think that the most interesting aspects of it are the ways that it's pulling these different sounds together, and the way that I think that it ultimately, I think that it kind of exemplifies a type of band that doesn't really exist anymore. And it feels like it's part of kind of the last wave of a lineage of, and where they're from in particular, I think is really important to how this record sounds and what is at the core of their songwriting, because I don't think that they were like super intentionally trying to be this, but in a lot of ways, it feels like early Southern alternative rock. Like,
I was surprised to learn they were from Alabama. Like, I didn't know where they were from.
I knew they were from Alabama. I've known that for a while, but yeah, this feels like it has there's some level of regional influence that I don't think is deliberate or intentional. I think it is something that creeps in to where they feel like they're part of the same lineage of REM, Pylon, B-52s, all of that stuff. Musically, I think overall they're doing twee more at a time where I don't think very many people were really trying to do twee, and it's that classic twee. It's Bell and Sebastian, Tiger Trap.
Yeah, like they were, at least Katie is like really influenced by Rilo Kiley.
Yeah.
Though she did say that when she was talking to Matt about producing the record and how she wanted it to sound, she gave him like Titus Andronicus's like the Monitor, whatever, the Civil War record. Mm-hmm. That and like the Thermals record, like the big one, the big Thermals record, because the Thermals are pretty important to the indie punk sound too. Unfortunately, thanks to Hutch Harris's behavior, but over time, yeah. So I guess twee. But she was also, they seemed as influenced on like that wave of like indie rock.
Yeah.
That was, different from your Death Cabs and your, Interpols and that kind of stuff. Or all that post-punk revival stuff. The more enduring stuff from that time period. Yeah, listening to the record, I
probably like the microphones.
Yeah, maybe. For me, listening to the record, I listened to it not that long ago, and my initial takeaway from that first listen was like, it's okay. Like, I thought it was just fine. Re-listening to it, like listening closely and intentionally to what was going on the record, like I can hear a ton of what comes out later from them both. I hear what everyone else like connects with, like lyrically. I think people really connect with this album. They were like apparently jokingly called like college lit punk, because like the way that she wrote lyrics. And she said that at the time I wrote way too many words, it was way too wordy. I had to try and make everything fit, and it was very difficult to get everything in there. I was really into poetry at the time, so like I was very inspired by that. And I could see that because reading through those lyrics and like listening to what she's singing, I'm like, oh yeah. This is kind of that same, she's in that same school of writing as like John K. Samson or Blake Schwarzenbach. Like it's like a very smart writing.
Yeah, it's very literate. Yeah,
very literary, and she's like trying to use the most like complicated words that she can in like phrasing. Whereas those two musicians are more likely to be like, what fits better? They figured out what needs to fit faster than she did. It seems like. But
well, yeah, I mean they had more time, I guess.
Yeah,
to develop their writing style to be able to say you don't have to have the 4 or 5 syllable word here, because that's taking up. That's taking up your entire phrase.
And it makes some lines very clunky. Listening back to it, you're just like, that's a lot of words you crammed in there, or a lot of syllables you crammed into that line. So it like goes on longer than you think it would. But like reading it, I'm like, these are really good lyrics. Like I really enjoyed what she was writing there. These are smart lyrics. I think she's changed her writing style drastically since then, but to be a little bit more musical focused than like content focused, My biggest complaint, though, is that it's a little samey.
Yeah.
Well, I have 2 complaints. Production stinks. Bad production on this record.
Yeah. I mean, we know why, but
we know why now.
We know why. Doesn't really sound good.
It's a bad production. You can't hear the bass at all. I hear no bass on this record. You can hear the drumming, but it's not like you can't really hear what she's doing in it. And the guitars are just they're just recorded very poor. It could be a mix issue as well, but like I think the mix is bad too. Yeah, it's a bad mix and it's recorded bad, but it's not so bad it's unlistenable. You know, it's the kind of bad that's got like charm to it. It's the kind of bad where you're like, oh, this is live. Like it feels live. It really does feel live.
Well, it's par for the course at the time in the scene.
Yeah. Yeah, like the Hop Along records sound like shit. And the Laura Stevenson early stuff sounds pretty rough. And that AJJ record sounds better, but it's still like kind of rough around the edges for the type of music. And yeah it's still a very DIY mindset. Yeah, so those, and just sameness. Like as the album goes on, it's just like these songs really all start to sound the same once you get past like the halfway point.
Not even the halfway point for me. It gets pretty samey immediately. So it's funny because it starts with Tennessee, which is the most different song on the record.
Yeah, it is the most different sounding song because it's one that's like it's just her and a guitar for a really long time and some harmonies, and then like the full band doesn't come in until like 2/3 of the song is gone. There's sax in there too, maybe, or keys or something. There's something going on in the background there.
I think. Yeah, that's what I wish more of the record sounded like, because I do really like that song, and I think that where it leans into Allison's more driving, garagey stuff, that sound is really not served by the recording, so it really just doesn't have a punch to it, and it really just blurs together after a while. A thing that I've mentioned to you before, I think when I was listening to the most recent Waxahatchee record, which I liked more than the previous one, was that I was like, think there's something about the way that Katie writes melodies that, and I think a lot of it extends from her lyric writing as well. She has kind of the same phrasing a lot. And in this instance, like on this record, it makes sense that you kind of have to have that certain phrasing to be able to get those words in the way that she does. But it gets really repetitive on this record. But it's something I've noticed that has continued to be an aspect of her. Like, I think it's extended itself less in her phrasing and more, though it is still there. Like she has a particular kind of phrasing that she uses a lot. And I think when you combine that in the way that she writes melodies, to where she does the thing where certain kinds of songwriters, I guess, feel the need to change notes a lot. It's something I do. I notice a lot where I'm like, oh, I'm changing notes too much. I don't know. I would say now at this point, she's kind of developed a formula for how she writes melodies. But I was surprised at how much that is here too. How similar her melodies are, how similar her phrasing is here on this record 15 years before. Like she really kind of held on to, I know she's changed and probably feels like she's changed drastically, but there's something still that feels like the core of her writing that I don't fully connect to.
Listening to the record, I wasn't sure. Like I knew Allison and Katie were both in the band, but I didn't know like who played what and that kind of stuff. So listening to it, I was like, I thought they maybe traded vocals in this band, and they don't. And so I was like listening. I was like, well, that's Katie, and then that's Katie, and then that's Katie. It's like, oh, okay. Katie's doing all the singing. Like she's the main singer in the band. So I was hoping to get like a compare and contrast to the vocal styles, but they don't do that. Like I was just like, oh, okay. Katie just plays drums and does some like backup vocals. Playing drums was a surprise to me. I don't think she didn't drum in Swearin. I think she was like guitar vocals and Swearin. So I was hoping a little bit more. I was surprised. I was like, oh, okay. P.S. Eliot is more like what Waxahatchee is than Swearin is, because Katie's singing them and she's writing the songs, and like that first Waxahatchee record sounds as bad as this record production wise. And that goes into their breakup as well. Like they thought they kind of accomplished everything they'd wanted to accomplish as a group, and Allison was beginning to feel unfulfilled. Like she started to, she wanted to write her songs and get those songs on the record. So that's kind of why they call it quits and they go and do separate bands, is so that like Allison can do what she wants to do, and then Katie can continue on with like the type of stuff she's doing. But yeah, that's it is a very specific way that she like sings her lyrics in songs and her melodies, that listening to it, I was like, The difference between then and now is she just has a more confident, powerful voice. That to me is like the biggest change in her vocals.
And more, and more efficient with her words to where it doesn't feel as cluttered. But the patterns are still there. The melodies are still kind of based on the same patterns and in the same phrasing. And phrasing is hard.
Yeah.
Like to do there's a reason most people stick to like the most basic phrasing, what's just going to fit the beat. To do really unique phrasing, that's hard to do. And I do think that she is trying to do that. And I think she has accomplished developing her own style.
She is unmistakably her own vocal. Like,
yeah,
there's not a lot of copycats of her that sound like her. Like, they're maybe copying like the style of music, but they no one can do the vocals that she can do. These are wholly uniquely her vocal patterns and styles, which helps make her really stand apart too. And stand apart from a lot of the contemporaries that she has, and people jacking her style, and they can't take that like intangible that she has. It's hard to replicate, which is why I think she will maintain, this kind of dominance in the indie rock, indie folk, indie country sort of lane that she's in currently. And who knows, maybe like 2 records from now, she'll do an electronic record. You never know with this kind of musician, what they wind up doing, but she'll make her own Neil Young's Trans, Well, you want to give it a rating?
Sure. I would give it a 3. I wanted to like it more than I really actually did.
Just a 3 straight up.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it, apparently I liked it more than you. I'm going to give it a 3.75. A lot of the tracks on here, as I was listening to them individually, I was like 4-star track, 4-star track, 4-star track. And only towards the end of the record where I was like, all right, I'm starting to feel this record. Like, it's 30 minutes. It's too long for this record. Not too long for an album, but just like there's not enough variety in sounds and styles on this record, and the production isn't great. That like 30 minutes kind of starts to feel its time by the time you get there. So that's why I take like a 1/4 star away. But yeah, I enjoyed each track as its own track. So it just loses something in the whole album feel of the whole record. It's interesting because you're the one who wound up picking it, and I think I was like, oh, I just listened to that. So that's why I was like not as like excited about listening to it.
Yeah, but I thought I would appreciate it more.
I also feel like I found more each time I listened to it. It's one of those like the first time I heard it, I think the sameness really blended together. The second time listening to it, I was like, okay, I hear what they're doing. I just got a little tired of it at the end. And then the third time I listened to it, I was like, okay, I'm hearing the things that make this record special and why people connect to it. So this could be one of those like growers. Like you have to kind of spend some time with it to find what's going on there. Or you could just flash forward to like where she's a better, just more succinct songwriter. All right. Well, I think that will do it for us. Unless you have any other final thoughts. Nope. All right. So thank you all so much for listening. Please make sure to follow us on all forms of social media. We are at Punk Lotto Pod, pretty much wherever you think of. We're there, except TikTok, not there. Give us a rating or a review on whatever podcasting app you use. Patreon.com/punklautopod. And thank you. We will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.